Thank you, Eddie, for that very kind introduction. The problem with an introduction like that, it's going to be setting unrealistic expectations. Seriously, I mean, it is an honor for me to have the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I consider it an even greater honor to be among such a group of distinguished speakers. And in fact, what I'm going to share with you has already been mentioned by the various speakers in one form or another. But I hoped I will still be able to add some value because I'm going to approach it from the perspective of somebody working at a university. Now, clearly, I do not speak for the higher education sector as a whole, but I think one aspect of this reform is for people in different sectors to come together to look at issues that are of interest to all of us. And those of us who are in higher education have a chance to work across the interfaces, namely through outreaching to schools and at the same time working with people in the workplace. Now, what I have noticed in the discussion so far today is there are two recurring themes. The first one has to do with what are the important competencies in the workplace of tomorrow. And having answered that, we then need to ask a practical question: how can we best develop these competencies in schools, universities, and in our organizations? So I'm going to start with the first question. What are the important competencies? Well, back in the agricultural age, it was good to be farmers. We then moved on to the industrial age, where a lot of people were factory workers. And now we have heard about the information age, and people want to be knowledge workers. But actually, we have already started a conceptual age when people who are in demand are creators and empathizers. Now, when we look at Hong Kong, over 80% of our labor force are in service industry. And clearly, a different set of workplace competencies are called for in a service rather than a manufacturing economy. Now, that being the case, shown on this slide are some new demands on our graduates. And you can all read, so I won't read them off to you. But notice that I have highlighted two things which are important, namely a point that has been made by our various speakers today: the development of effective outcomes in our students other than knowledge and skill, and the importance of having them working together. Now, not only is the world changing, even though we can argue how rapidly the change really is, at the same time, we are dealing with a new generation of students. In other words, the learner characteristics are also very different. Now, you can call this group of people in whatever label that you prefer: Generation Y, Millennials, post-80s, or even post-90s. The fact is, we are now dealing with a set of learners who come to us with very different learner characteristics. So we really need to be careful as to whether a system that has served us well in the past will continue to serve us well as we go forward. Now, Daniel Pink, in his book, A Whole New Mind, raised the necessity of developing both sides of our brain. The left brain, which is usually the analytical side, along with the right brain, which is more the contextual side, or some people would call it the reactive, the creative side. And he went on to identify the 6 senses that will be important in the workplace of tomorrow: the ability to tell a good story, the ability to listen with empathy, to make meaning out of an experience, to enjoy, i.e. to play, to bring things together as in a conductor in a symphony, and finally, to design things. Now, in the new book published by Douglas Thomas and John Seeley Brown recently, these authors pointed out to these key elements in what they refer to as a new century of learning. Again, learning in the collective, learning as inquiry, and learning as fun, i.e. playing to learn. Now, if you put this together, and I took the liberty of describing the characteristic of the workplace of tomorrow by the word decipher. So the workplace of tomorrow is going to be diverse, engaging, collaborative, so on and so forth. Now, we can perhaps argue whether this is exactly the right adjectives. The point I'm trying to make is the workplace that we are preparing our young people for is going to be quite different from our current educational system approach. So I would like to get to the next question: how then can we best prepare our young people for the workplace? Now, as we have heard so far, the aims of the current education reform are driven by our commitment to helping our students to develop as whole people and as lifelong learners. Now, this point was reaffirmed in the recently released Higher Education Review report. The importance to pursue an interest in lifelong learning and to possess the mental and conceptual skill so that they can adapt to change. But I also want to emphasize, as many previous speakers today have, education must not be seen as something for the economy alone, nor should we narrowly look at education as preparing our students for the world of work only. So this quote from the UGC Higher Education Review report does remind us of the importance of providing thoughtful and responsible citizens for Hong Kong. Now, I maintain that there are actually no conflicts in preparing our students for the world of work and for responsible citizenship, because underpinning both are a set of competencies that cut across. So it's not an either-or situation. I would therefore like to see higher education as a transformative experience, one in which our students emerge as lifelong learners. They also enjoy lifelong development across multiple dimensions, and at the end, they are lifelong employable. Now, to do that, I maintain that we have to encourage our students to ask the question, why? Because if you look at this golden circle, as proposed by Simon Sinek, it's only through asking why we will be able to clarify the purpose, the belief, and the cause of an action. In fact, I think this is the point made by Professor Hayward earlier. Sometimes we are too busy thinking about how to implement and reform, what the reform involves, but from time to time, we do need to ask why. And the same thing is true when it comes to our young people, is especially in particular in an instrumental society such as Hong Kong, they tend to ask the what and the how, and I think we have the responsibility to engage them in asking the question, why? To illustrate, why? Why do we want to ask them why? Because throughout today, we have already heard of the importance of helping our students to develop the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitude. Now, when you put the three together, ask is competency. And notice that it's competency that we want to develop. And for somebody to be competent in something, and the examples we heard from Professor Hayward, such as teamwork and communication, is not about the knowledge, nor it is about the skill. It's about the reasons behind doing whatever one is engaged in. So it's only through asking what, how, and why will we be able to develop in our young people the competencies not only for a workplace of tomorrow, but also for responsible citizenship. I would like to share with you this book that I recently read. It's called Cultivating the Spirit, or How College Can Enhance Students' Inner Lives. It's a research study recently released by a group of researchers at UCLA, reminding us the importance of spiritual development of university students. Now, I realize that from time to time, we want to shy away from the discussion of spirituality, even though that is the one theme that cut across many of our keynote speeches today. It's either that great minds think alike or we all read the same books. Now, the point is, spirituality or spiritual development is not about religiousness, as is commonly misconceived. Spiritual development is actually engaging our students or our young people in asking the questions, why? Why am I here? Why am I studying? Why do I need an education? Who am I? What is my relationship to the people around me? What is my responsibility to the society? Now, the nice thing about this particular research is through engaging students in spiritual discussion of the why, what, and how, it actually translates to a more productive and enjoyable university experience. And it actually shows a correlation with satisfaction with college as well as academic results. So it's not, again, an either-or situation.